Faculty, or very rarely do, and knowing that about 35% of us are here this morning, and many more teaching around the edge that we know that couldn't be here this morning, but introduce ourselves. I think I know everybody, so I won't bother with me, but let's start over with Bob, because I don't think some of the instrumentalists know our vocalists, and go around and make sure we know what you do and who you are.
I'm Bob Rockerbrand. I teach voice lessons part-time.
And I'm Sarah Rockerbrand. I teach voice lessons part-time.
And they're married, so that's
58 years.
I'm Andy Radford, and I teach bassoon lessons very part-time.
I'm Neil DiMaggio, and I play piano with the choir, with college choir, Michael. And sometimes accompany other things.
Gil.
Oh, I do Gil. Yeah, I play piano for all those crazy Gil students.
And Andrea DiMaggio, and she's a flute, married, 7 years.
And flute choir.
And flute player.
Don't forget that. Sign up. I'm Paul Maury, and I, with Andy, teach bassoon, but also do chamber music for wind, brass, and chamber orchestra.
I'm Stephen Hughes. I teach trombone along Eric here, and we both play in the faculty brass.
Yeah, in which I play tuba. West City Brass.
West City Brass.
You missed a chance to plug Sonos.
Sonos.
Two of our wind faculty ensemble members right there. Took up this time.
And Stephen said, I'm Eric Heidner, and along with Stephen, I teach trombone and phony and tuba as well right now, which is fun to do. And yeah, West City Brass, but I play horn, all things.
Great. I'm going to get these. They're special.
Oh, yeah, especially. Yeah, exactly. Well, I teach here full-time. I teach music history, the majors. I teach a world music survey course, and I direct chamber singers and choral union, which is the first year choral group. And I wanted to mention that Sarah is partnering with the choral union, particularly in the areas of local languages.
Hi, Kathleen O'Brien. I teach voice part-time and the performance class. Time to be discerned.
And my vocal arm this year for the opera production, too. Looking forward to that very, very much.
I'm Emily Summerman. I teach violin here part-time.
I'm Joanne Kim. I teach clarinet part-time, and I'm in the Sonos wind ensemble with these two guys.
Well put.
Oh, and you also organize and administer the recitals, right?
Recitals, any recital questions, you can come to me, and internship for the students to be colloquium.
Colloquial recital.
Internship, say that again.
Internships, if any of your students want to, partake in any internship music-wise in the community or at Westmont, you can send the students to me.
Joanne coordinates that. So if you have an idea for an internship or a student interested in an internship, we want to really fire those off.
I go by Han or Hansu, full-time violin, chamber music, and I oversee the string area.
Oh, yes. Hello, my name is Miho Kim. And I'll be filming all the recitals and stuff. I was not expecting that. Oh my god. Hello.
Musician in our midst, you introduce yourself. It's good. Yeah. And including this session so that our colleagues that couldn't be here today can come into what we're doing and know what's going on to start. So we did introductions, that's great. A couple little start of the year important things to make sure everybody's on the same page. Syllabi turned in. I sent you a link yesterday for the website to turn them in on. All syllabi for all classes, all lessons, all sections of everything should be posted on the syllabus archive. We had our National Association of Schools of Music audit, you could call it, last year, and lo and behold, they looked at every syllabus. It was astounding for every section of everything. And they found one we didn't have. Please! But they found it. So it's really important that we keep that accurate and up to date for your sake, for students' sake, and for the institutional sake. So do that. I really want to recommend that you look at one of the syllabus templates. And there's some things that should be in there about disability services, about things that we can provide for students, about any standards for grading and academic credit, and some requirements about colloquium The standard is all students should attend colloquium, non-majors at least half, and all majors, all colloquiums. That's anybody who's studying privately in any discipline. And you get reports on colloquium regularly from Keith in the music office about who is attending, who isn't. Oftentimes students will come to you and say, oh, but I have a conflict with colloquium, what do I do? It's okay, work it out. Anything compensatory time-wise can work. But it should be a performance experience. And that could be going to performances, it could be performing, it could be listening on YouTube to creative things, it could be going to the Met Live or going to the Santa Barbara Symphony. But it should be something that engages them in the interaction of live performance. And they're also responsible for what goes on in colloquium, which is hearing about how to sign up for stuff and juries and all that. So they need to be in tune with colloquium, even if they can't always attend. You can make alternate assignments that are equivalent and compensatory. The reason for that is, obviously, we want them involved in performance and seeing what performance really is. And secondly, it's a matter of credit hours, that they need a certain number of contact hours for a 1-unit or a 2-unit class. And colloquium fulfills part of that contractual obligation we have with them for teaching time, for credit hours, contact hours in the course. So it's an important part of their growth and curriculum and a piece of it too.
So where can we find this template to check our syllabi?
I've sent it out a couple of times.
Oh, it's on there.
Yeah. But feel free to ask me if you need something like that. And I would say, if you want to include specific performances through the year that are critical for them, like your recital, or the West City Brass recital, or the Sonos performance, you should. That is integral to their growth. And I would encourage all of us to require the faculty recital in the fall and the faculty recital in the spring as part of the requirement for the course of study for lessons. We'll get them here. It's not that the requirements are onerous, they are helpful. The students, I'm so amazed by the beloved students, they appreciate requirements because it helps them be accountable and helps them know what really we think is important. And if we don't put it on the syllabus, they just write it off as not important. So put it in. My students are required to attend the fall faculty recital. That's why we do it. We do it for them. They need to be here. That's a reasonable requirement. So think about those kind of things that you want to ask them to do in the syllabus. Watch out for your rosters. They're coming soon, and you confirm those to establish payroll. So if you have 17 students on your roster, you'll be asked to confirm it, turn it in, and that goes into the payroll process. If there's 18 students on your roster, and you've only talked to 17 of them, please make note of that. Tell Keith and Mandy so they can figure out what happened to that 18 student. Maybe they should be on your roster, maybe they don't exist, maybe they signed up by mistake, but we don't bill them for lessons that they're not taking. So be fairly careful for that. Anybody having trouble scheduling lesson times or contacting the students? I'm going to ask the students the same thing, but use the word teachers. Good, everybody's feeling comfortable, that's great. And lessons happen next week, so that's great. Also, I think Mandy and Keith have started the process to organize the fall faculty recital, which we just talked about, which is the 13th of September. If you haven't signed up for that yet, is that coming to you, Mandy?
Yeah, there's a form to fill out. If you go online, you can find it under, I think, faculty resources.
Faculty resources. Keith made that great new page of faculty resources on our website. Fall faculty recital form is there. Please participate. We'd love to have you sing one song. Play a 2-minute piece on the piano, whatever it is. Just to have the faculty kind of represented in a broad section, and the students get to see, wow, look at all these people in faculty. Better than playing a half an hour, sonata. Don't do that. Play the fast one. And get them excited about coming to other things during the year. It's a Whitman sampler, and Mandy might even say, gee, those 5 songs you turned in, that's really great. You want to sing the whole Schumann Liebe, but how about if you just sing one? On this recital, maybe find another place to do the others. So Mandy and Keith will help manage that. By the way, this is Mandy, by the way. If you haven't met her, Mandy Kellogg, I'm your administrative assistant, so go for that. That's pretty cool. Big news, the Bachelor of Music degree was approved this summer. I have one student already jumping on it, who wants to change from BA music performance emphasis to BM. And she can do it, it looks like, and she's going to try. So it could be our first BM graduate, what happened in 21. If she's successful in that pursuit. Yeah. Julianne Jimenez, Harvest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Wants to go for it. And she can, as long as Hansu's cooperative, Couldn't get in here in studio class. I know we got a couple other things we have to do, but I think we can get it done. I'm going to come back and talk after our special presentation some more about some bold steps we're taking for applied music to encourage and properly serve Bachelor of Music students. And it's really pretty exciting and pretty bold how that's going to work out. I want to get into detail about that a little bit later. And the other big thing is our constant awareness of student development and student recruitment, if you want to call it that, reaching out and bringing the Westmont's program to the attention of talented young musicians in high schools. And we have a really exciting program for that this year. And again, I'll do more detail about that after our special presentation. But we have coordinators in every area who are helping lead the charge and help you do your work as you reach out. And that is Andrea in winds, that is Daniel Frotz in brass, that is Hansu in strings, that is Brian Lane, who's supposed to be here, in voice. I think he's going to come today, but we'll get him introduced on Friday with the voice faculty. Those four are critical to the connecting outward. And also the admissions department has a wonderful program. I'll be sending real details about this soon and talking about it later, to financially support your enterprises and initiatives to reach out to the schools, as does the music department. We want to be very active and very proactive in that and get a real community sense of we're all responsible for building up of the musical enterprise of this place. It's no one person's job, it's all of our connectivity that really makes that happen. But today, we have two special guests. They are here because of our students, because they are always changing. These are not the same students that we started to teach 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago. New challenges, new perspectives are happening all the time. I would note that last year we had multiple students, both majors and non-majors, experience significant and debilitating mental health issues that really affected their performance in class and the performances of their peers that we have to be sensitive to and be hopeful with. We also had some tensions in student encounters, both in the classroom, on campus, out of the classroom, and on tour last year that were extraordinary, in my experience, that we need to be able to deal with. And they're accentuated oftentimes by student anxiety. So we've got two of the best to help us look into and touch how do we deal with this generation and up our game, if you will, because our game needs to change all the time. Those guests are Chris Dahl, our Vice President of Westmont, one of our Vice Presidents, and our Title IX Coordinator. And then also Eric Nelson, the head of our Counseling Center. And they have important ideas to share, and I'm going to turn it over to them because they know what to do. So, gentlemen, thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'll just follow Michael's lead and say hip hip. Welcome back to almost all of you, but welcome to those of you who are new to Westmont. Great to have you here. And I want to thank Michael for inviting Eric and me to be here. And the key presenter is sitting right there. He'll be up momentarily. I want to provide a little bit of context for his remarks, and then I'll follow up a little later on with some reflections from the perspective of a vice president of the Title IX Coordinator. But one thing that I want to make sure that you know is that we are recording this for the benefit of those who are not here. But I do think that this is important information for everyone on the faculty, but I'd say music department faculty as well. Many of you work with students one-on-one, and sometimes there are some issues that are magnified when you're working with students one-on-one than in a classroom setting. So this is being recorded. It's been my privilege to work in higher ed for 35 years now. And if you've been in higher ed for any period of time, you've probably noticed there's been a lot of change over that period of time. And just to provide a little bit of context for our presentation today, I've seen lots of changes in the student body in 35 years. Lots of changes in the law, and also changes in the expectations of students and parents. So let me just say a few words and then invite Eric on up. In terms of generalization, some changes in our student body. What I've heard from colleagues in particular, both student life staff and also faculty, is that today's students, large generalizations, but many of them appear to be more fragile, less resilient than in the past. Seems to be more evidence, greater awareness of such things as anxiety, stress, depression, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. And then related to that, you'll hear much more talk in terms of triggers and trigger warnings. What might those be? We're going to be talking about that a little bit more this morning. Let me give you just a little bit of data from some higher education literature. This was particularly fascinating to me in an article that appeared a year ago. 70% of the sample of college freshmen appear to have experienced at least one potentially traumatic event in their lives. Now, I don't know whether you've experienced that as you've worked with students, that you are hearing more and more from students that they have had traumatic experiences in their lives. But 34.4% of those people met the criteria for probable PTSD. That just shocks me, but that's what the study showed. There's some other studies that show that the percentage of students with PTSD is much greater than the percentage of the general population, and college women are at a greater risk of trauma from sexual interpersonal violence. And so that's why it's so helpful for us to have Eric here today to share with us his expertise from the perspective of the counseling office. Before he comes up, let me just share a few generalizations about changes in the law I've seen, and also in terms of expectations of students and parents. Clearly, as you may know, there have been expanded protections for students. I'm thinking from the perspective of Title IX that deals with issues of discrimination and harassment. There are many more protected categories today, such as sex and gender, than there were 35 years ago, that's for sure. Greater awareness by students and parents of their rights. And so as a result, we may hear from parents more. We certainly hear from students more, who seem to be very knowledgeable about what their legal rights are. Going along with that, there are greater expectations for each one of us in dealing with students and parents. And I would also say there's liability that goes along with that. Which is why we're here today, just to provide you some training, some additional information about working with today's students. Eric's going to do the heavy lifting here, and then I'll come back up to share a little bit, from my perspective as Title IX coordinator, what I'm seeing in the area of harassment, discrimination, and then Michael will come back up to lead us in some discussion and Q&A. So let's get started. Eric, come on up.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be here and share a few thoughts. And I'm going to be pretty comprehensive today, so you might have questions that come up. I think there's going to be time for Q&A at the end, correct? And so I'm going to try to touch on a lot of different areas. So if you have questions that come up, save those and we'll talk about those at the end. I also wanted to define my limits here. I'm a psychologist. I'm not a faculty member. I'm also not even remotely a musician. Tried for many years, didn't work out very well in my favor. So my goal is not to speak into your turf. And so there will be areas where you are the expert. I'm going to share things from my side and give you some ideas and thoughts that may fit for some of the applications in ways that you connect and meet with students. And so by no means am I trying to tell you what you have to do. I encourage you to tailor what I mentioned today into some of the practices that you have with students. Many things I'm talking about today you're probably already doing. So I'm trying to be comprehensive here. One of the things I want to start with is talking about what we're seeing in college students now. And a lot of us is going to be like, yeah, I'm seeing this in class every day. I'm seeing this with students every day. So 3 general factors that we're particularly seeing with college students. And what we're seeing, first of all, is difficulties with emotional regulation. So they have the challenge of regulating their emotions. So when they feel something, being able to, anxiety, anger, those emotions, we're all going to feel in life. We're going to feel a lot of emotions. But keeping those emotions within check can be really difficult for a lot of our students. So small anxiety quickly becomes massive anxiety and goes off the charts, much of what you've seen. Distress tolerance is also a challenge for some of our students. So where emotional regulation is small anxiety becomes big anxiety, distress tolerance is smaller stressors can feel like major life-altering stressors. So I did poorly in a music lesson, or I got a critique from a musician on my work. That means I should no longer be a musician. Everything needs to change. Should I change my major? Should I leave Westmont? And so it's like these small things become these big things because they haven't really been equipped to deal with distress, so that it's difficulty tolerating that difficulty that they experience. And then social disconnectedness. Social connectedness is a common psychology term, but this, for what we see with students, is they're feeling very disconnected, which is surprising because you see them on their phones and they're always connecting with friends on their phones, but as we know from lots of research, they feel very disconnected from each other. And they don't feel very seen, they don't feel very heard by others. I read this fascinating Wall Street Journal article that just came out. There's lots of press on this because a lot of people are talking about student anxiety and things like that. This recent article hit the nail on the head quite well. It talked a lot about how parents have worked so hard to raise their students to be prepared for college, or what they need to be prepared. So parents are confident when they send their kids to school sometimes. But then they're shocked when their sons and daughters struggle so much. And what the article talks about is that students have been over-prepared for college. And you would think, well, that should make them ready, right? No, what happens is that their academic achievement has become at the center of their self-esteem. And so they've achieved a lot. And their achievement has become, this is who I am. They come here, and it's a challenge. And so when that achievement is next to their self-esteem, and that starts to fall apart, then who they are as an individual starts to disintegrate. There's overprotection. So they haven't been taught how to respond to failure. Failure is such a common part of life, but they haven't been trained on how to do that because parents or teachers or whoever in their lives in the past have come in to sweep them up when things have gone sideways. And then there's overinvestment, where parents have structured things too much for them, so they're not ready when structures decrease. As we become autonomous individuals, it's good that structures decrease when we go to college, but they're not ready necessarily for that. So talking a little bit more, 3 general fears. So we have these factors, now these fears of what we see. There's this fear of not belonging. So that disconnectedness would lead them to fearing like they don't belong. So even if they're involved in all these different things, I get student leaders that will come in, they're involved in so many different areas, but they're like, I just don't feel like anyone knows me, or listens to me, or cares about me. Fear of not making it academically. And so, oh my goodness, if I fail this, and everything's going to be lost, like I mentioned. And then unrealistic expectations that I need to have this all figured out by the first week of my freshman year. I need to know what my major is, and if I don't, then I am way behind everyone else because everyone else has got it figured out. And what happens, and this is where it starts to bring faculty involved, is what happens we get students with a lot of high subjective distress. Subjective just means like this is their own life experience. And so while you might be hearing them talk about what they're going on, you're like, wow, do you know what it's like to have kids or to lose them? You know, but this is their subjective experience. So this level of anxiety is how they're feeling in the moment. And sure, are they overreacting? Potentially. But in the moment, what they're feeling, it's palpable, it's real. They're also very vulnerable. So they are seeking help. You think about their parents that were overprotecting them, they're hoping to find someone here, potentially, to fulfill that role for them. Not all of them, but some of them. They're also anticipating high touch, that you're going to be very connected to them and helping them along the way and hoping for that. And they're going to be isolated. So while we talk about them not feeling connected to others, many students, and again, I'm talking some students, I'm not talking about all, but some feel very isolated, so they're going to be looking for someone to fulfill that role for them. And it's in that they might be dependent on faculty, dependent on a friend, dependent on somebody on campus, or seeking someone who can support them. So those are some of the things that set up, that's how they are delivered here to our campus, many of our students. And then we're left to figure out what to do in the situation, all our different roles. So in all of this, is that we want to tread thoughtfully. How do we tread thoughtfully in these situations, in all of our unique encounters with students? As we know, with student mental health, it's complicated and there are clearly some needs, right? So then, as a faculty member, as a student-faculty relationships, what are we doing in these relationships, and how are we thinking through, this is what they're bringing, and how are we then going to connect and support them along the ways that help them and that don't harm them. And you are a critical resource, and it's complicated, right? You are very critical in this, in their developmental journey. And I have a portion, you know, we see people for individual therapy, that's part of my role. The work that you guys are doing is equal, if not in ways sometimes more important, because we get a lot of students who don't seek help and then come to their professors or their music teachers to talk about what they're going through. So they're looking to you for this support. The student-faculty relationship is critical. There's lots of research on this, but research has shown that students that feel more connected to the professors in college are more engaged in work when they leave here, have higher levels of subjective well-being. When there's a faculty member that cares about them, that pays huge benefits. I mean, you think about the faculty that you remember in your life, when you went to college or graduate school, oftentimes those people that did the extra thing to take care of you and support you and cared about your trajectory and where you're going. So in ways, these relationships that we have with students are huge. However, we have, again, all of these factors that a lot of our students are coming in with. And so I'm going to give us some practical tips here on how to manage that. One last thing I want to add on this list over here of the issues that some of our students are coming in with is that they might also be more likely than past students to misinterpret some of the things that we're doing to support them. And what's great about the Society of Women Rights now is that more people are talking about situations that come up. So sexual harassment, for instance. Women and men are more likely to bring up things that should be talked about and should have been talked about decades ago. But also with that, we get that they're more likely to maybe potentially even misinterpret things. So that there's a gesture of care and it's misinterpreted as something that maybe it wasn't. So we just have to be careful about the boundaries that we have with students. And I'll talk about ways to protect yourself and protect that relationship to prevent those likelihoods of misinterpretation from happening. My general frame, my general encouragement is to be conscious, intentional, and consistent in all of your encounters and relationships with students. Be conscious. And I'm talking to you here, I'm also talking to myself. Because in therapy, the same thing happens. I can easily become over-involved with students and not thoughtful about how I'm engaging with them in the therapy room and outside of the therapy room. So I'm talking to myself here as well. In fact, I learned a lot preparing for this, even for my own work. So be conscious. Be aware, be thoughtful. So you're having a relationship, a good, healthy relationship with a student. Be just thoughtful about how that relationship is going. Be intentional. So when you do decide to do things to help that student, just being like, okay, what is the main goal here? What are we trying to do? What am I intending to do with this whatever action you're doing? And being consistent. Because if you start to have things that you do for this student, but you would never do it for these other students, you want to be mindful of what are the circumstances here. And I'm not saying that every student relationship has to be exactly the same, not at all. But just that we're being mindful of how we're engaging with students across the board. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more briefly about being trauma-informed. This is a small sidebar, and then I'm going to wrap up here about some general ideas on how you can have healthy relationships with students. So to be trauma-informed, it just means that you know a little bit about trauma and how that looks with students. So if we're talking about students that come in with past trauma, these are some things to be aware of. First of all, when someone has trauma, when they have PTSD, or they experience something traumatic in their life, trauma doesn't always lead to PTSD, as you know. But one of the main things is avoidance. So they don't want to, frequently people who've experienced trauma don't want to talk about it, don't want to deal with it, they push it off, they try to avoid it. And it's one of the things that people do that makes trauma worse. The nice thing is in your role, your job is not to push them into facing what they're not wanting to face. That kind of thing should happen within a therapeutic relationship or in a different type of relationship. Another thing that people experience with trauma is re-experiencing symptoms. And so, I'll give you an example. Let's say someone experienced something really traumatic on a train. So whenever they're around a train or a subway, that might cause subjective to physiological distress for them. Almost like at times they might feel like they're in that exact incident where whatever traumatic happened. Right? And so these are some of the main symptoms that you might see with some of your students, and that's why being trauma-informed is very important. Because you might be seeing a student seeming like they're overreacting about something really small, but you might not have the context about why they're reacting in that way. So the next one on here, common types of trauma that students may be subjected to. The common ones that we see are sexual assault, sexual violence that they may have experienced previously coming here, while they're at Westmont, while they're in Alta Vista, wherever it might be. Being exposed to a fire. There's been a lot of students some students who've lost homes in fires, have been evacuated, of course, within the last few years. Shootings, so having, knowing people that have been in shootings or being in shootings themselves. Experiencing other natural disasters, child abuse. There's lots of different forms of trauma that your students could be walking in the classroom with. And as I mentioned before, you may not know what they're bringing in. And so, what I'm encouraging you to do is to have an awareness about things that could potentially trigger students. Now, I know this is a whole huge debate. What I'm not talking about in here is coddling our students to where we don't want to ever expose them to something difficult because we're worried that somebody in the room might have a problem. It's not all I'm encouraging you to do. What I am encouraging you to do is to be thoughtful, though. So if there is something that is some sort of content that's going to be shown in music, I'm not sure what that might look like in music history maybe or something like that, where you're bringing up something that could be potentially challenging for students, is to just be thoughtful about that. If it's going to be something particularly, if something's, where there's sexual content that's related to it or something like that, you might want to warn students, hey, when you're coming into class next week, we're going to talk about something that might be uncomfortable for some. If you need to step out and get some air or breathe, that's just fine. So it's okay to let people know that something like that might be going on. So if there are ways to warn some students about difficulties, that's fine and good. Again, I'm not encouraging you to warn them. I'm getting ready to critique your music. No, you don't have to. I'm not encouraging you to coddle them, but just to be mindful. What you'll see, if you do see them behaving erratically or something going on, it's okay to have a conversation. Hey, I noticed that it seemed like are you doing okay? And how can I support you? It's okay to reach out and talk with your students. So noticing distress can be a good thing. Now, I'm going to close by talking about how to think about these relationships with students. And I want to start with the implications of this power differential. And this is what I deal with in my work as well. How do you protect students with this privileged role that you have with them? They come in, many of them come in and see you as, I don't know, God, a huge authority, a celebrity, a master musician, someone they want to emulate. And so they're looking to you to, you are this very important person that they want to please and they want to be close with and they want to be strongly connected to. So that you have this privileged position with them at the start of the relationship. And because it then becomes your responsibility to be mindful of that relationship because you are the authority in these situations. The first recommendation I have in that is to, of course, continue to be conscious, intentional, and consistent. The first is to have an awareness of boundaries. And what I mean by boundaries is knowing where your role ends and their role begins. And that is a very gray area. There are faculty who, and I know that this is great, there are faculty on one end of the spectrum who primarily teach, and that's it. We don't talk, they don't really engage in a lot of relationships with students. They maybe, if a student wants to bring up emotional content, they might redirect them. That's fine. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum would be faculty that are more connected with students. On a small campus, we have frequently multiple relationships with students. We might be advising or mentoring or teaching. On this other end of the spectrum, though, sometimes faculty might find themselves in roles where they're all of these roles, but they're also on call 24/7 for a student. Or they are in almost a quasi-parental relationship with a student. I'm not saying being on that end of the spectrum is necessarily bad, but we have to be mindful of these positions, of this closeness that we have with our students, and be thoughtful about those relationships that we have. And as I talk about more of these ideas, I think it'll make more sense. So being aware of where you want to set your personal boundaries and where the other students' personal boundaries are as well. You are in charge of interactions with students. So you aren't responsible for their behavior necessarily, but you are the one in charge of these interactions that you have with them. And I'll give you some, what I mean by that, I'll give you some ideas here. When you interact with them, you cue them on what's permissible in this relationship and what's not permissible. And verbally and non-verbally. So I'm talking about, even things like physical proximity, a hug, a handshake, those kinds of things. I'm talking about whether when you walk into an office, whether we're going to talk in here with the door closed. I'll give you a list of things here actually that I came across. And before I talk about that list, because you want to be very thoughtful about how you decide to structure your encounters with students. So, do you keep, for instance, tissues on your, this is ridiculous, I realize, but just being thoughtful, do you keep tissues on your desk? Yeah. Just in case, that someone cries in there, and that this is a safe place for you to cry in this office. Do you nod and maintain prolonged eye contact when your students start to disclose personal information? So they start sharing something, and then you lean in and start nodding, which is what we do. But being mindful that we are cueing that student to keep giving you more of that information that you're giving. Do you give out your personal cell phone number to undergrads and graduate students? And if you do, many of us do, what are the parameters around that? When can they call you? When can they not call you? Are there some students where you need to set that up? Are you Facebook friends or Instagram friends with students? Are you responding to student emails in the late evenings or the early mornings or in the middle of the night when they're facing a crisis and they're reaching out? What are your I mentioned this before, but what are your touching practices with students? What's physical contact look like? And so again, you model for them what this relationship is going to look like. So they're coming to you like, I don't really know what this relationship is going to look like. And so you're the one who sets the stage for that in terms of how you communicate with them. Even things like how often they show up to your office. Are they allowed to show up to your office outside of normal office hours? Those kinds of things are you cueing them, and this is what's acceptable. Just being thoughtful, being conscious, intentional, and consistent about that with your students. Do you choose your responses or do you default to listening? Well, the point about that is, sometimes in these situations you'll have students who disclose personal information to you. And one of the things that happens sometimes from faculty is, and everyone in general, is that sometimes we default to listening. So a student who is going through something difficult starts to share it. And we start to have alarms going off of like, maybe this is not the right setting, but we care about the student, we want to help them, so we just start listening. And then maybe they say to you, this is confidential, right? This conversation we have, and we just maybe kind of half nod, because it's not really, but maybe it's private. And so what happens though is that we're eliciting more feedback and more of their story from them. A key point I want to say as an aside, I'm not telling you not to have these conversations with students. I'm just telling you to be conscious, be intentional, be consistent in these dynamics that you have with them. Because what you're communicating there, so they say, is this confidential? And you lean in and nod, then who knows what's coming next. And so you want to be careful about some of the things. So I put on here, do you choose your response? So if someone's saying, hey, can I use this space? Or they're using this, they're talking, you might want to just cut them off and say, hey, I'm glad to support you in this. I care about you a lot. The nice thing too is that Westmont's also a caring community. So as much as I'm going to be here and support you, at the end of our conversation, I might also help you connect to other resources as well in this community as best as I can. Because what we don't want to see, and I see this happen with students, is that, as I mentioned, they sometimes like to connect with one faculty member or two, develop these really close relationships with faculty. Not necessarily problematic, but it starts to get in this place where it could be problematic, or they're not getting the resources elsewhere. Same thing goes with counseling and psychological services, our office. I don't want to be the only social support for a student. I want them also to be reaching out to their RAs, to their peers, to their faculty. So we don't want faculty to be the only person who's carrying this load of whatever emotional issues the students are going through. So it's okay to have those relationships, but then connecting those students to other larger networks as well. And not also with this number 3, too, not promising them confidentiality, not because then that you can get in a sticky situation if they disclose something to you, and you do need to break that confidentiality. You're in a difficult jam there. Even with students that I have, I can't always maintain confidentiality. I have to report if there's child abuse. So I will let students know, hey, there are situations where sometimes I do need to bring other people in to help with support. Some things that some faculty do is they'll put structures in place to communicate boundaries, whether it be on your syllabus. We talked about, you can have counseling and psychological service on your syllabus, or other resources on campus if students need more support, so you can help connect them with other things. Having in your office, if you need my business card, or knowing where our website is, if you want to quickly direct a student to it in your office. I know Residence Life staff do that. They'll pull up our website and say, hey, glad to keep supporting you on this. Here's another resource, and this is how you can make your request for counseling. I know the guy over there, he's a little bit funny, but he's good at that. Whatever to help bridge that connection. And maybe this is most important, but I think one of the best cues that we have is to listen for your own reactions to students when you're developing these closer relationships to them. Maybe you're feeling exhausted from them, frustrated by them, angry, resentful for whatever this relationship that you're having with them. Or maybe you're enjoying this. You're looking forward to the next time they're going to visit. Or you're thinking about them a lot, or you're worrying about them a lot. You're wanting to support them more. Just be aware of it. Notice the pull. And it happens to me in the therapy room. I get pulled into these situations. I'm thinking of a situation with a student I have right now where I'm having to try to reel back because we don't want to get too involved in some of these situations. Sometimes we have to reel back. And the best thing you can do is you will have an emotional response to the student. So key into whatever that is. If you're feeling overwhelmed, or, oh man, I'm the only person in this situation. What do I need to do? So listen, or this is starting to feel like there's something problematic here. And if you have that feeling, consult. Reach out. I don't know, I don't know if it's reaching out to Mike or consulting with someone. Hey, is this, this is what's happening in this relationship with students. Is this okay? What do you think I can do in this situation? I know in my role, whenever anything bad, problematic happens, if you can always say, hey, I reached out and got consultation, it's always the best thing to be able to say, I reached out and got help. So listen for your own reactions. Be conscious, intentional, and consistent in all of your interactions with students, particularly those ones that feel like they're just a bit messier and more challenging. And that is, I believe, that's it. Oh, one last thing just to wrap us up. Again, students are experiencing more distress, they're more vulnerable, they seek close relationships, which is good. It's good to have those relationships with students. It's our responsibility to protect them. So be conscious, intentional, and consistent in your roles. Thank you so much.
So let me add just a few other words, not much, and then we'll try to preserve some time for Q&A and discussion. From my perspective, as a Title IX officer, someone who's responsible for making sure that the college is fulfilling its responsibilities in terms of federal legislation regarding harassment and discrimination. Several things. One, I've already mentioned, students and parents are very, very well aware of what their protections are, much more so than was the case 35 years ago when I started in higher ed. Fortunately, the training in the area of Title IX is much more sensitive than it used to. In fact, you may be dealing with students who have experienced trauma. So conferences I go to will help me think through, how do I make sure that this particular student has the resources that she or he needs? How do I go about interviewing this student in a way that would be more sensitive for someone who is a victim of sexual assault? And how do I interpret what's being said to me if it appears like there are gaps in memory, some other things? So training is much more sensitive. We're having sessions like this with you, which did not happen 20, 25, 35 years ago. We are using a training tool with our supervisors in the area of discrimination and harassment, which begins and ends by asking the question, what would it be like if you were to put yourself in the shoes of the other? So if you're dealing with a student, you might just consider that question. What if I put myself in this student's shoes? Even ask yourself the question, what if this is a victim of trauma? How would I interact with this student differently than I would with other students? Really important questions. Let's just throw out a scenario where you happen to have a student who suddenly says, I need to leave. I just need to leave. And you respond, well, I want to talk with you about this, which is very appropriate, but you need to do it immediately. Or if this is a victim of trauma who has experienced a trigger, the safe thing for them is to leave immediately. So you have some options rather than pressing them immediately to respond to you, because you would have some very legitimate questions. Gee, it seems to me you're overreacting. You have the option of following up with them and having that conversation later rather than immediately. A few other things in one of the videos that we're using with some of our staff. There are a number of warning signs. And so let me I put them on a sheet here for you along with a few other things that I hope would be helpful for you. We're not going to go over the list, but here's the list. Just a number of things to be alert for as you're working with students. Maybe something pops up here that makes you think, is this student perhaps someone who has experienced trauma? If so, maybe that needs to alter or modify the way I interact with this student. Eric's done a great job in terms of talking about power differentials. And I would say just from the perspective of healthy relationship with students and protecting yourself from possible complaints, to be proactive and thinking through how perhaps might I adjust my pedagogical style, my interaction with students in light of what I've heard. Today's goal is simply to increase your sensitivity to the fact that we do have students who have experienced trauma. Therefore, how might that impact how you interact with them? And then, my role in terms of the Title IX coordinator, a lot of it is just managing relationships and helping to clarify expectations. It's not taking a cookie cutter approach to carrying out a procedure. It's trying to be particularly sensitive to this particular individual, keeping in mind, hey, I want to end up in a place that is as good as possible for this student and for the institution, which means I need to think in terms of managing the situation as well as possible with this particular individual, and not necessarily following the same approach with every single student. We don't have time here, but I will make sure you get a copy of the link to this YouTube video, Keeping Children Safe in Music. It's just one illustration. It occurred to me, many of you work one-on-one with students, and so there might be some additional issues for you to think about. This particular YouTube video is about a violin instructor with an elementary school child. And the way that this violin instructor is used to teaching the student, go over, put a hand on the shoulder, let me show you how to do this on the violin, and actually putting your fingers on their fingers. Well, this video is really good. So, there's another approach you can take without needing to touch a student. You can touch 8 students, maybe no problem with 4 of them, but the other 4 may be victims of trauma. And you just see in this YouTube video, as the instructor puts the hand on the young boy's shoulder, it's just very traumatic for this young person in the land of trauma. So anyway, we've just thrown a lot out at you. Again, you know, we've given you a lot of information, some strategies, but more than anything else, I just think we just want to increase your sensitivity to the issues.
Thank you, Chris. Know that Eric is there in the counseling center, I know that Chris is there as our Title IX coordinator, although he's not going to be with us after October, but there will be a replacement, which is virtually impossible for Chris, because he's been so good. Over the years I've been at Westmont, Chris and I have worked on several specific issues between faculty and students, between parents and students, and parents and faculty. And I call Chris and I say, I think there's something going on. I am, as department chairman, a required reporter, so that if I see something, observe something, someone bring something to me, I have a legal responsibility to take it to Chris. I'm the conduit if that has to happen. So those things are there. It's real. And I also thought when I first came to Westmont, I kind of thought, I wonder what's happening here, because these students seem a little different than 15 years ago. And over the last 10 years, I've noticed it more profoundly. And I was kind of in a place where I was thinking, what's wrong with Westmont? You know, why are Westmont students this way? And then I started to attend some more national conferences where this was the main topic for the faculty development sessions: how to deal with students in this age, because they are more fragile, they are more sensitive, they're more reactive, they're more aware. Oh, it's not Westmont. You know, this is real. This is what surrounds us all. So being heightened to it and having great resources to help us. Yeah, my question.
I do have a question. Here it is one-on-one a lot. And so are we as faculty allowed to be told in advance that this student is enrolled as a special need or whatever the term is, or is that private to the student? And we just sort of have to figure it out over the semester that, oh, this student is one of those that has special needs.
Now, I know sometimes they bring forms from the Disability Center to us.
Okay, that's what it's called. Disability
I need
Center.
accommodations.
Okay.
And they will bring those. Sometimes they are not officially registered with those services, and they don't bring us forms. And I'm not sure about the confidentiality part. Is that?
Yeah, it'll be private, yeah.
Yeah.
So. And sometimes we don't, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that challenging over the years of teaching.
It's very challenging.
Yeah.
And the college where I was before, the student could elect to not go to the study. And then you don't feel, you won't get that form, so you can suspect maybe something's going on, but you haven't got that form.
Yeah.
Eric, in terms of mandated reporting, obviously, if somebody comes to us, we'll follow through. I think everybody here knows that. And to let the student know that we have an obligation to do so.
Yes.
But if somebody wants an anonymous source before they say anything, is that you? Do we have a counseling service on campus where we can send without them having?
Yes, there's two places on campus where you can go and report that they've been sexually assaulted that is not disclosed outside of that meeting. That's counseling and psychological service and the pastor's office. There's one caveat to that though. If they are under the age of 18, then it would have to be reported regardless. Or if they're under the age of 18.
Under 18.
And also the other one would be if, like let's say they're abused by a parent and it seems like their sibling could be at risk of being abused, that would be exposed as well. Those limits to our confidentiality, I wouldn't worry about you telling a student that. We can tell them that when they come to us. We would let them know that in advance. So, but yeah, the counseling, psychological services, and the pastor's office are the two places to do that.
It would probably be helpful for an adjunct like myself, who are not here all the time, if maybe we had a little outline in the music office of straightforward reporting if we actually find out something we need to report, and anonymous sources as well.
Definitely.
Very helpful.
We're going to share this link, the video with everybody, and we'll follow up with something like that too.
I want to follow up with Andy and just say, because once in a while students will be talking about certain issues, and I just say, go talk to people counseling. Because I'm not an expert. I have a student, for example, who had a functional and suffered from that. So I'm no expert. But the best I can do is say, I don't know anything about counseling, but go see them. Is there anything else? Is there anything more specific I can tell them?
I think you could say something like, first of all, we see about 30% of Westmont students in a given year. So and more than half in the time here at Westmont. So you could say something like, I've heard a lot of students utilize this resource. You go check it out for one session, see if you like it. But this is a place where you can learn how to handle this issue that you're dealing with.
I do say that.
That's great.
But
yeah.
Specifically, where is
so what they wanted to,
where is it, who to contact?
Yeah.
Physically what building.
Yes.
The counseling center is just up through Arlington on the left.
Yeah.
It's right above where we are now.
Yes. And the nice thing too, that there's a lot of times there's apprehension on students on how do I make this appointment. All they have to do is go on our website and there's a request for counseling. So they don't even have to talk to a physical person, which would make them anxious, right? They can just type in, I'm interested, and there's a form that's very long. Yeah, and I'll include that in some sort of handout or something that includes that information.
Very good. Anything else while we have experts in handy here? Yes?
Since we all deal with one-on-one, the confidentiality issue is tricky. If a student says something to you and did they actually have to say, I'm telling you this in confidence? They actually have to say those words? No.
No.
The sense of, I'm talking about self-harm particularly, not about, obviously not sexual assault, but if a student has assumed that you're telling you something in confidence, and then you discover that maybe there's a potential for self-harm, how does the confidentiality work with that?
Yeah, that's going to fall within, I think, the provost's office on how they want that to be communicated to the school. My thoughts on that are going to be that in those situations that you encourage the student to reach out and get support and say, hey, I would even be willing to reach out on your behalf to connect with the school. That way someone can help you with this situation that you're going through. That way then you can complete a care report, which I think they'll probably talk about that. And let's say the student's like, you know what, I don't want that. There are other ways too. You can still create a care report and put on there that you do not want the student informed that you gave this information. The thing is, some of these things, there may be more going on that you have one piece and we need to know that piece in order to provide that support. And the nice thing is that the residents, the RDs will go and engage with the student and they're not going to say, so tell me about that cutting that I heard about. They're going to do it in a really tactful way to provide support.
This CARES is something I have to follow up from this presentation. I'm going to send a link for the Student CARES reporting system. And anytime you have a concern about students, this is a great resource here. Simple website approach. You enter that you have met with a student, you have a concern, and it goes into the system. It's so good because you can put those kinds of notes on it. And also, Hansu might be concerned a little bit about someone in a violin lesson. And the next hour, that person might be in music history class, and Grace sees it, maybe I should probably send something in. And then I see them in rehearsal that evening and they're pretty stressed out. I wonder if that's something I should report. Well, if none of us do it, we totally miss it. If all three of us do it, then the people who are responsible for it say, there's something everywhere. Because maybe their RAs did the same thing and maybe their English teacher did a little bit too. And if they get 5 of those, okay, we need to work on this. If they get just Hansu's, so you're bad violinist. Then it's not so compelling. It's a way to network those concerns. Also, early on in the process, everybody likes to solve problems early. So if we can all at least have that awareness early, I'll send that link so it's easy to find.
I was going to say, if we could get some of that information.
Yeah,
exactly. That's why we're here. And are all into the process every day.
And I'm more concerned about under-reporting than over-reporting. So if you feel like, maybe I should, you probably should.
Chris, in terms of Title IX legal responsibilities, what are the things that if a faculty member hears from a student, they're required to report?
From a Title IX perspective, the college has decided to limit the number of what are called complaint recipients who are mandated to report to me as the Title IX. So supervisors, faculty department chairs are on the list of complaint recipients that are mandated reporters. If you're not a mandated reporter, you could just keep the information to yourself. My recommendation would be that you encourage the student who wants to keep this confidential to go to someone else. Certainly to go to the counseling center, possibly to go to the department chair, possibly to come to me. So the only mandated reporters would be supervisors, faculty department chairs, there's some others on the list, but not every foundation.
But certainly you can file a care report saying,
Absolutely.
I'm concerned about this student, and that's what I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the big one. And I do tell students that, when they come in to see me, can I talk to you about this? And I say, absolutely, know that I have to share this, with the appropriate officer in the college. Please, and I'll do it in an appropriate way.
How detailed are care reports? Like, if I wanted to, like, is it going to take me 15 minutes to fill one out?
Nope.
Can I shoot it off? in
Shoot it off.
30 seconds?
Minutes. Yeah, max. Yeah. And if you want to give up, you can. But you don't have to. I mean, we had one student who didn't make it through 24 hours of orientation because of anxiety issue. A talented music major. We're going to reach out and see if we can restore that in the spring or next year. But the care report on that one was already, quite long and quite detailed and thoughtful from the RAs and the residence life staff and all. We didn't even get to see her. She never got that far. But the sooner the better, and the more we're connected, the more helpful it is. CARES is great. I will send that out and I'll work on the flyer for Eric. Well, students are going to start pouring in, and that's a great thing. If you want to hang out for colloquium, we're going to have one beautiful performance of Bach Suite on viola, and we're going to talk a lot to the students about a lot of the procedural things that they're responsible for, and introduce any of you that are still here. But feel free anytime to ask questions about this sort of thing, and watch for some emails. We didn't have time to do everything we wanted to do today, but I will be sending you some updates, especially on the recruiting things and the Bachelor of Music, new initiatives. Again, they're pretty bold and pretty exciting, and good things happening to move stuff forward. Faculty recital, be on it, required. Check it out. Thank you again.